Hi, this is Savannah Saunders from The Wonderful World of Dance, and today I am thrilled to introduce Gabe Stone Shayer, who was recently promoted to soloist at the American Ballet Theatre and whose talent is highlighted by being a regular partner of the incredible Misty Copeland. Gabe is also the first African-American male to graduate from the Bolshoi Ballet Academy in its nearly 250-year history. Gabe is featured in a number of dance films, he's toured around the world, and is already choreographing his own work. Gabe has recently launched the Creative Genesis Project and has raised more than $30,000 to go towards creating and presenting new choreographic work, supporting other dancers and giving them work and the opportunity to perform during these challenging COVID times. So, Gabe, thank you so much for joining me. It's so lovely. You're in New York, is that right?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And yes, I'm in New York right now.
So there might be a taxi horn or a car horn every so often outside of your window.
There will be a taxi and a car horn, just to warn you.
Perfect. Well, I'm in London and it's a little bit dark and a little bit cold. So it's nice to be able to bring the two cities together.
Yes.
So how have you been dealing with the whole COVID and the lockdown? What's your experience been like to date?
I have to say I've been very lucky, very privileged. I escaped the city pretty swiftly when the company shut down. I went home to Philadelphia for about 2 days, and then with family we traveled out to Long Beach Island, New Jersey, which is a place that we used to own a house and we call a haven during times of peril. We went there during 9/11 and a bunch of other times to escape the city. So it was kind of a perfect place to separate from all the madness.
So you were actually born in Philadelphia.
I was born in Philadelphia.
So going back home for you is quite natural. But so tell me, when and why did you first start dancing in the first place?
Yeah, so I was always a very hyperactive kid. Before my memory started recording anything, my mom said that I was running around, wiggling, putting on shows, performing, for lack of a better term. I do remember, though, I think I was 2 or 3, one of my earliest memories, my grandmother would speak Ga, which is one of the Ghanaian languages, on the phone to relatives, and I would dance between her legs and spin around and to the cadence of her talking. And I think it was around then that my mom asked me if I wanted to do dance classes. I had a pretty full schedule at a young age. I was doing creative movement, Mommy and Me, all those sorts of beginning steps classes, and then started to formalize it as early as 6. In kindergarten, I wrote a journal entry when you first shape letters, and it said something along the lines of, the best day of my life is when I knew I wanted to become a dancer for the rest of my life. So I made a pretty bold decision at a young age to do this, even though I didn't really know what it meant.
To know that you want to be a dancer at age 6 is quite impressive, and to have achieved what you've achieved already in your 26 years is exceptionally impressive. What was it like growing up and as a young male dancer? What was it like for you when you were sort of going out to school with your friends? And were they all supportive of you, or?
Yeah, I mean, I found that my close friends were supportive. There was a lot of bullying, as you know, is, I guess, a regular occurrence for males in ballet.
Yeah.
So it was quite isolating at the same time. Thankfully, from my upbringing and from the strength of my friends, I never questioned my path. I always knew that I was going to do it, and I'm very thankful for the perspective that I have and that was learned and nurtured to kind of shut out the noise. It doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. It doesn't mean it's not, difficult to deal with, but I definitely knew that whatever they were saying didn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
No, well, by the time you were 13, you were already through some of your years of training and touring nonetheless, which is quite an exceptional thing to be doing at such a young age. Tell me about this experience and what that meant for you at that age.
Yeah. So I think you're talking about the Darfur ballet. So there's um, Rebecca Davis, an amazing person, humanitarian. She started Mind Leaps, which is an organization that goes to Africa, gives scholarships to students. Longer explanation, I'm not going to do it justice. But back then, she had a small dance company that would tackle social issues and other sorts of international world problems through ballet and through dance. And the one that she was tackling with me was the genocide in what is now known as Sudan, then Darfur. And I played a young boy, one of the main characters, who was, a product of these atrocities, these horrible things that were going on. And I remember Rebecca asked my mom if I could see some of the images and learn a little bit about what was going on. And I was young, I was 13, but my mom was like, "Yeah, it's please do it." And I think it was such an important moment for me because I was connecting something that was so real and so horrible and so and extreme and impactful, through the vocabulary of dance and through the vocabulary of ballet, and I really saw the opportunity to be able to really speak through the art form, which is something that I already felt like was innate in me. I moved to speak, I danced to talk, and connecting a real story to the movement really was kind of the first time that I had this visceral reaction on stage, and was able to kind of unveil that vulnerability that it takes to become a real artist on top of being a ballet technician.
And what was the feedback like from the audiences who came to see Rebecca Davis's dance company performing Darfur, and your experience on stage, as you say, really performing that very extreme and just horrid sort of story? Well, this is history. What was it like for you?
So I think for me, it was, again, like the first time. It was the first time I really. I mean, I always emoted on stage, and I'm just a dramatic person. That's another thing that drew me to the performing arts. I'm not performing, but at least I can go under the umbrella of performing, so no one thinks I'm crazy. But I remember I had this duet with my quote unquote father character. Long story short, little backstory was my character was a product of rape, and my father figure was not really my father, but I didn't fully know and whatever, and so it was just this desperate duet of "Why Don't You Love Me" and all this push pull. And I remember the music was so strong, and we're kind of dance fighting slash embracing and doing all these things. And I remember I got off stage the first dress rehearsal of it, and my skin was red and my heart was throbbing, and I realized I completely threw myself into the process, to the point where it didn't feel like I was acting anymore, and that was amazing. That was an amazing thing for me to experience at such a young age. And to the audience, I feel like I got a lot of amazing feedback about what we were saying, what we were talking about, but also how it was portrayed and how real it felt. And that was another lesson. I got a lot of lessons early on that I don't have to give it to the audience. I have to give it to myself and to the people around me, and that will emanate, wrong word, to the audience. That the audience will be able to see what your experience is. If you're having a true experience, they'll have a true experience.
what a powerful experience, as you say, at such a young age. And then you go from this moment, this real deep experience, to the rock school, and there you are performing classical and contemporary, and you're doing Nutcracker, and which is on the other end of the extreme scale under this performing arts umbrella you mentioned there. That must have been quite a shift for you.
Yeah, I mean, there was a big juxtaposition there. I had been training with Russian teachers prior to joining the rock school, so I was used to the classical vocabulary, and I'd been actually very much whipped into shape before doing Darfur. So I was more of a classical dancer, and that's something that called to me. But then going to the rock school, it's such an international school in terms of the students and the teachers. That was also another amazing experience, just experiencing culture, understanding that the vocabulary of dance and ballet is universal, and these things connect all of us. So that was really beautiful to experience. But yeah, just I think at an early age, I understood that I love ballet because I love the regality of the vocabulary, but also that finding the realness, finding the reality, the human part of it is so amazing as well. It's such an intense duality there. You're trying to present this fantasy of the impossible in terms of technicality, in terms of story and narrative, when it comes to being a cavalier or a prince or whatever, blah blah blah. But the root intent is transcendent of humanity, and it doesn't have to do with fairies, and it doesn't have to do with enchanted forests. It has to do with love, humanity, people, relations, and I think people get a little bit confused because you're standing like this and you're trying to present yourself as a prince, but it's within the fantasy of perfection that you present a beautiful romanticized dialogue, if you will, about humanity. It's like a poem.
That's so beautifully put. You're so very eloquent. It's absolutely lovely. This performance experience that you had, no doubt you took with you as you entered into the competition circuit. You competed in a number, and the YAGP and the New York International Competition. You've also received a number of different scholarships as a result. The John Cranko School in Stuttgart, and the prestigious Princess Grace Academy in Monaco. Tell me about what that experience was like for performing in competitions, which is quite different.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a competition. You go, there's you have a limited amount of time. You have a number. It sometimes can feel like a machine, and I think there are two sides to it. A lot of people don't like competitions because they feel that ballet is subjective and that you can't rate it. But you can rate the technical ability of someone. So I thought that was important. And definitely they do rate the performance of the dancers as well. A lot of people can get lost though in the technique, and I think that does happen. I, however, took it as a performance opportunity and an opportunity for extreme exposure. Just in the semifinals, there's a lot of directors that come from all over America, and then when you go to the finals in New York City, almost every major director or representative of schools from America to Japan and everywhere in between, they're watching, and that's how you get these opportunities. That's how I got these scholarships to both. If I wanted to go to Monaco or Germany, I was able to.
Which is a really unique opportunity, as you mentioned. But you ended up at the Bolshoi Ballet Academy in Moscow. Tell me about how you ended up over in Russia.
Yeah, so I did the summer intensives in New York. They were also based in New York, where they would fly over the teachers from the academy as well as a few of the students to help with partnering, because there weren't a lot of men. And yeah, there's a lot to it. But the director of the school came the first summer that I ever did the intensive, and she observed the last week of classes as well as the final performance. And from there, she offered me a scholarship to come to the school. And so at first I split my time between the Rock School in Philadelphia and Russia. I went there for a few months and came back. And then finally went for a full year, while still doing the summer courses with them and working with them. So, altogether, I say I was there for 2.5 years. And then after I left, I kept on going back to train with my teacher and to take classes with the Bolshoi Ballet, to keep that training intact.
Well, the training obviously paid off, because you won first place for Best Male Dancer, which is quite the accolade. And you mentioned there you were sort of going back and forth between countries and between schools, which is no doubt has a very interesting impact on your training, because you're not sort of embedded just in one. You're split between different types of training. When you went over there and you graduated as the first African-American male in its 250-year history, what has that meant for you as a role model, but as a person and as an artist as well?
Honestly, it's funny. I think it means more now than it did then, because then I was one of the only Americans in the school. There was maybe 3 or 4 of us spread out between different levels. But I went there with a purpose, absent of my skin color, absent of any preconceived ideas about anything besides training to be the best. And I went there with an open mind and open heart, if you will, and I learned the language. I speak, read, write in Russian. I learned their culture. I was in their country, and very much embraced the experience there, and was so thankful for my teacher, Ilya Kuznetsov, who is a pillar still right now. Whenever I need to, I'd either call him or just think back to some of those exercises that he instilled in me, and the ideals that he instilled in me about the methodology of ballet. But graduating, I was graduating as a proud Russian student, if you will. I didn't even really think about the fact that I was Black or African American, because they didn't so much. It wasn't when I worked hard, it wasn't a question that I'd be cast first. When I worked hard, it wasn't a question that I'd be in the middle bar, which is a big deal there, and so on and so forth. So it wasn't. None of my achievements were ever weighted with my culture or skin color, which I was so thankful for there. Now looking back, because now like coming back to America, which you'd think would be the opposite. A lot of my achievements are measured by my skin color, by who they think I am, and what I may look like to them, and their experiences with people who may seem like they could be like me. So I now know that, promoting and representing, I am promoting and representing something that's so much bigger than me in the culture and context of America, or Western culture and ballet culture in general.
Yeah, absolutely. You having just been promoted, soloist of the American Ballet Theatre is such a huge achievement for anyone. It's, as an artist and as a dancer, you are one of the best companies in the world. It's so wonderful. I just want to go back to what it was like for you being on tour with the other famous company, the Bolshoi. who obviously are world-renowned. And obviously, as you mentioned, you are given those opportunities for your technical skill, your artistic ability. What was that experience like, being on the road with the famous Bolshoi?
It was unparalleled, so amazing. It was my first, it's funny because people are like, oh, like you get in the company, it's so different. I felt now, especially in retrospect, but then and now especially, my last years in the Bolshoi school were like being in a company. We were very much responsible for ourselves. We would go on tour. They were like, here's some per diem, go and like show up to class tomorrow. So it felt like I was a company member already. But definitely, walking and rubbing elbows with Natalia Osipova and Ivan Vasilyev and all these other Bolshoi stars, just those are the easiest for people to know, Vlad Lantratov and Artyom Ovcharenko, was incredible for me. I joke with people and say that I grew up in Russia because I was such a young person that I had my formative teen years there. And so those are my idols, those are my everythings. And yeah, I can't even really describe how amazing it felt to be on stage where Osipova was, maybe playing the main character, but I was the soloist. So I was kind of, we were doing La Fille Gardée and they had, in the Russian version, there's this part called Dvoyki, which is like the two friends of the main guy. And so I'm just like holding arms with Vlad Lantratov on stage, just like swinging around. And yeah, it was really, really incredible.
Well, just as an aside, you named just some of the greats that I've absolutely loved interviewing. Natasha, I popped around to her house. She lived around the corner, and I popped around and interviewed her, which was an amazing conversation. And Artem as well, who's on the cover of my, I think, 5th edition of the magazine. Wow. We went to Moscow, and he and his wife Anna, we went into, it's just a bit of an aside, but we went into this amazing photo shoot with Daria Volkova, and it was just like incredible to be in Moscow. I absolutely just was blown away by, obviously, Moscow, but I mean, the company comes to London, and we're lucky to see such and have such great stars like, Natalia here. But to be with them, what an amazing, like, stepping stone for you. Getting back to your story, where you come back to the US and you join the American Ballet Theatre studio company and then into the main company back in 2012. What was that like for you? Was this your dream company after the Bolshoi, or what was your thinking?
No, actually, to be completely honest, I can formulate this better, and I've said it in different ways over a period of time, but I may never have consciously thought about being Black in dance when I didn't need to, or when it wasn't presented to my face. But I do remember being really young and seeing Carlos Acosta at the Royal Ballet. And maybe I didn't make a direct connection, but I think I did think, well, like, without question, he's playing all the princely roles. He's doing Don Q as well. He's doing this, that, and the other thing, but he's a dancer. He's an amazing dancer, so he does everything. So I just recently came across this interview from when I graduated from the Bolshoi Ballet, where it's in Russian, and they say, I said something like, oh, I have an audition for Bolshoi when I was graduating next week. And if I don't get in there, then I'm going to try to go to Covent Garden. So I never saw myself dancing in America, not because I didn't think that ABT was amazing, but I guess I didn't see myself. I didn't see the representation, and subconsciously wanted to go to Royal. ABT happened by accident. I have one of those birthdays that either you're too young for the class or you're too old for the class. And in the case of Bolshoi, I was younger, graduated when I was 16, I want to say. I think that's right. 16. So I could have gone back for one more year. And they were like, okay, like, go back to America, do your thing, come back for one more year. So I come back to America. I'm like, oh, I should do something. I take the ABT summer intensive. The director, Kevin McKenzie, teaches a few classes, and then I get offered a contract to go to the studio company. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess I should. I think I should do this. I guess that makes sense. And so yeah, that I joined the studio company that fall. Yeah.
Wow. Well, maybe one day we'll see you over here at Covent Garden, maybe, or at Birmingham Royal, where Carlos is now the artistic director.
Yeah.
Another incredible dancer. What an incredible man as well, I have to say. Yeah. He's a true inspiration. Yeah. Lovely, lovely, lovely man. So ABT, what was your first year like in the company? Do you remember, your sort of first year, and you're in your first professional company? Well, actually, you've already had, quite a bit of, experience with companies to date, but yes, here you are, you've arrived at your company.
Yeah, so it's funny because, so I joined the studio company, and I was only in studio company for about 4.5, 5 months before I was taken into the company. And honestly, studio company felt like a step down in terms of not level, but just in terms of, I felt like I was very free at the Bolshoi. I was handed per diem and walking around Greece by myself. And then it kind of was, a step into the school system a bit. ABT's studio company has gone through a bunch of things, ABT2, ABT studio company, blah, blah, blah. And I think generally when it's called studio company, it was a little bit more married to the school. So I was in between, and thankfully we didn't have to wear uniforms, but they were on the cusp of making us wear uniforms. I was like, nope. But yeah, so it felt like a weird step down. And then I joined the company and was thrown into the machine of ABT, walking down the hallway, like rubbing elbows with Irina Dvorovenko and Paloma Herrera, and taking class next to Sasha Rudetsky and all these big names. I was accustomed to being close to those sorts of people, but also it was still amazing. So I knew how to act, but of course internally I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. But I do remember my first rehearsal with ABT was Firebird, Alexei Ratmansky's Firebird. And of course I knew who that was because he was, director of Bolshoi. And funny story, I was in the back of the room, apprentice, not doing anything, just standing and watching. Everyone leaves the room after the rehearsal, and he's sitting in the front with ballet mistress Nancy Rafa, and I go up to him in, the Russian training way, but not imposing my Russian language because I didn't want to confuse him, because that confuses people for obvious reasons. And I'm like, hi, Alexei, my name's Gabe. And he's like, you're Gabe Stone Shayer. And I was like, yes. And he's like, your teacher was Ilya Kuznetsov? And I was like, yes. And he switches to Russian. He's like, so I can speak to you in Russian, yes? And I was like, yes. And he's like, great, I'll see you around. Welcome to ABT. And that was just choked up. I was like, I can't. Okay, well, life is over. I'm done. That's it. And then so after that, Alexei would feature me in a lot of amazing work. And one of the first things I was learning with ABT that following fall season was the Shostakovich trilogy that he made, where I was third cast for Ivan Vasilyev and Daniil Simkin. So that was, and I was an apprentice. So that was unheard of and really, really crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah. To this day, I'm so thankful to have had Alexei pushing for me for my whole career, because I don't know where I would be.
So worth studying Russian for all of those years.
Yeah. So it's a very tight-knit community. If you speak it, then it works for you.
Yeah, I can imagine. My goodness. But now you're a soloist. Yes. Tell me about, you've been promoted soloist at a very strange time. this is, we can continue to use the words unprecedented, challenging, devastating, and
Sure.
all of, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, we are in these times. What does it feel like being promoted pretty much during this period, while life is very different, probably, definitely to what you would have expected to have experienced?
For sure. I think this time, in terms of the pandemic and in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement, has presented a lot of emotional responses from everyone, including big organizations like American Ballet Theatre. And in terms of my promotion, for the past 6 years at least, and that's being nice because I joined 9 years ago and was third cast for Ivan Vasilyev. But for at least the past 6 years, I've been dancing almost exclusively soloist roles and bits and pieces of principal roles. And I've done a few full-length ballets, Alexei's. I've done Whipped Cream, Corsair, and a few others too. I've danced with Misty Copeland since I was 15. And so it was, I'd been waiting for it for a long time, to say the least. And I'd been kind of pigeonholed in terms of my character as a person and my what people thought my abilities were, or my I don't know what people assumed of me, and so this doesn't feel that different. To be completely honest, it's a huge relief. I imagine people who haven't gotten to actually do the roles of their ranks, which there are a few who were promoted that haven't actually done some of those roles, feel kind of slighted because they can't be on stage right now. They can't, come into their rank and role as a principal or whatever. But I've been doing all of these soloist roles for years, so I'm kind of like, great, so now I have the title. You know what I mean? It's like cool, been doing that work for years now, but thank you for the title.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, finally.
Exactly. So
waiting a while.
I was like, I knew it because I've been doing this, but so in that way, it's not. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything because I've already done a lot of, if not all of the soloist repertoire. So now I'm kind of just waiting for the next one.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you don't have to wait, another 6 years for your next promotion. As you say, you've been dancing the soloist roles and principal roles and rubbing shoulders and dancing on stage with, the greatest names of ballet today.
Yeah.
So well overdue and well deserved. But it also does bring into that sort of the view of, is it, and obviously for you it's not, because the roles versus the title, because you've been doing all of the roles and now you have the title. But as you say, there are some who have got the title, but they haven't had the opportunity to do the roles. But now you're just waiting to step back onto stage. And what's your return journey going to be like to getting back onto stage and being able to, have the title over yourself and continue to do what you're doing before and hope to get promoted quicker for the next season perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on so many projects right now that I otherwise would not have had the opportunity to devote so much time to. And so I think within that, stepping back, I think that obviously there's no direct algorithm to how, why, or what, or when in terms of promotions, clearly. And so with that being said, I'm doing a lot of things that I want to do for my artistic fulfillment, but also to forward the dance community, the ballet world, to change these narratives, to do all these different things. And I think those actions will hopefully speak towards or be tokens or whatever, speak towards the things that I'm trying to achieve rank-wise at American Ballet Theatre, and in general as an artist and as a dancer. So I do have something coming up that I'm not going to talk about yet,
Okay.
but I will say that I will be dancing. I'll be dancing, and you'll see it.
Well, we love the
Yeah.
thought of you dancing. That sounds fantastic,
Yeah.
and it sounds like a nice secret coming down the line.
Very soon, yeah.
Very exciting. We'll have to, plug that when that one's ready.
Yeah.
But today, you've been creating work. What inspired you to start choreographing in the first place? Tell me about that inspiration.
Yeah, so I've been choreographing my whole life as well. So making up little dances when I was young, doing talent shows at my elementary and middle school. I always, I say quite literally, live to music. There's a song. It changes, but there's a song that I turn on to clean my house because I like the dipping beats for the sweeping and the folding. It's just, I like literally live to music, and so I listen to music, and sometimes I envision steps, or I envision the intent behind the music, my interpretation of it, and have wanted to manifest this. Parts of this album by Oliver Arnolds, amongst a few other artists, into a ballet because it's something that I just wanted to get out. It's like I had to artistically purge it, and it's been sitting there for so long. So right now is the perfect opportunity to, now that we knew we could get together in some capacity with protocol, COVID protocol and testing and locking yourself down, blah, blah, blah. I got a group together of my colleagues to, first and foremost, employ them, because we don't have employment right now. We're not really being paid our normal salary or at all during big chunks that we were supposed to be.
You're furloughed at the moment, is that right?
No, that's New York City Ballet. So it's kind of complicated, but long story short, right now we're going to be paid 60% of our salary for 4 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but before that we were on, our summer layoff, and before that we had the season we were being paid, and then from March until May we weren't really getting anything. So there were huge chunks of time when we were, people had to move out of their apartments. It's crazy. So I was like, if I can raise money to employ these dancers, but also give back a product, having to think like a businessman as well, while also doing something that I really want to do, I think it's the perfect combination and the perfect platform for something to grow into a bigger thing. So yeah, I brought a bunch of my colleagues down to where I had been quarantined for months, on Long Beach Island, New Jersey. There's a large facility called the Foundation of Arts and Science. It's essentially a huge gallery space with a bunch of different levels, and I got ABT to donate their sprung floor to me because they weren't using it for anything. And we worked for 2 weeks. It wasn't exactly 2 weeks. It was actually 7. We worked for 7 days. We got there on a Monday. We started working on Tuesday. I gave them Sunday off because I wanted to be a nice director. And then we had a performance on that Thursday, or last Thursday. So yeah, we put together a 30-minute ballet in 7 days. And there's definitely parts of it that I want to expand and pieces that I want to add to it. But it was a pretty finished product that I'm very proud of, and proud of the dancers as well, because they completely contributed to the process.
So tell me about the ballet. What was it? Was it a narrative ballet? Was it based on a story? Tell me about it.
So the ballet is abstract-ish, but there was a common thread that I think went through the whole ballet, which was the questions that we ask in humanity. I know it's little subject matter.
Tiny subject matter.
Tiny, easy, super easy. No, but so there were 3 kind of main sections with divvied up into like 3s, let's say. So the first section kind of was presenting the question of why do we follow religious practices, and what is within this repetition. And it's to be presented as a question, not a challenge. It's just kind of the first number. It's a solo by Katie Williams, where she's kind of lamenting and kind of going. You see her struggling, going back and forth between this prideful carriage and then going into these weird positions. And I kind of wanted to play. I played with the Seven Deadly Sins. It's not exactly that, but I played with the Seven Deadly Sins for her solo, and talked about the juxtaposition of, being human, but also being ashamed of being human, or having to answer to this book or this higher power that we don't know about. Not to say my opinion is my opinion. It's not to be put on anyone, but it is just presenting this question. So she played that beautifully. Then it goes into a group section where everyone's kind of, in church-ish. It's this beautiful choir singing. And the women do these repetitive movements, and the men are a bit more free because there's some, misogynistic tones to some of these things. And she's the higher power. There's a bunch of things going on. So it kind of has like different layers, and there's a longer version that I can explain, but it's, playing with the idea of like why, and just look at yourself, think about it. And then it gets more into love, and one of my favorite parts is this pas de deux between these two people, Luciana Paris and her husband Jonathan Lujan. I definitely used their stories and everyone's stories within the work. I had the intent, I had the idea. I knew this piece of music was going to be a love pas de deux, but it was going to have layers to it. It's kind of somber. It's, I quoted a passage from a poem, and it was, I can't seem to make out your face, but even in the dark, I know that you're smiling and not saying all the same things I don't say. And I kind of was obsessed with the idea of, we never really know what's going on in each other's heads. We don't, even if we tell each other about our pasts, there's so much to us that may be we can't comprehend from each other, but love is this weird common thread that supersedes anything like that, but also comforts when those things present themselves, and it's a push-pull. So it's kind of like a somber, happy, love, weird feeling pas de deux, and I really loved what they did with it and what I learned about them and put into the piece, which other people won't really know, but adds to the richness of their emotion in it. And then lastly, it kind of is a nudge / wink to the audience. There's like, it goes back into spirituality because like the world, like science, you can only calculate to a point. Scientists can say there's the cosmos, and then we have these things. And then if you ask them why to a point, there's no answer. So it kind of turns back into, well, why don't we just like dance around a fire and look at the trees? Like it's kind of like a wink to the audience. And that's definitely, there's another pas de deux that I did somewhere else that I would add to it. That kind of is a duet between a male and a woman, and a male and female, and you don't know if they're a priest, a priestess, a god and a goddess, or just two humans dancing around a fire, worshiping the moon. So, that's a very long-winded version. There is a longer version, but that's kind of what the piece is about. All of those questions, and it's there for people to interpret and find themselves in.
You're certainly not afraid to tackle the big questions and to challenge your audience. As we mentioned before, the backdrop, particularly in America, less so than over here with Black Lives Matter and with what's going on with the pandemic and, with politics and with religion. These are quite big, quite challenging questions depending on as you say, how one looks at oneself and how one looks at the world that's going on around us. And it is quite something to tackle those big questions through ballet, but ballet and dance must tackle those questions. And as a young artist, it's great to see you taking on, not only, wanting to build funding and, employ the other dancers, but also to use it as an opportunity to really explore some of these subject matters. And I just wonder, sort of, because you're over in New York and it's very different to over here in London, what it feels like for you as this young artist in this situation, which, for many listeners, it's unimaginable, and a lot of people do not appreciate that in this moment, dancers, like you say, aren't being paid. There are no jobs. Companies aren't being able to perform. Over here, the government has just announced new restrictions. We still don't know what's going to mean for the dance industry, but it's pretty much on its knees anyway. So I just wonder what it feels like for you, and because your backdrop is very different, and your situation amongst this is very different, particularly to mine as a white woman in London from Australia. It's a very different experience, obviously.
Yeah, I would say that, I can't impose upon people that it's important just for importance sake. I have to show them. And I found that true in many different things. And so I can just, make a GoFundMe and say, hey, dancers need money. But I think it's more important and more of a responsibility that I'd love to take on, to show people that this is something that's important. When all the buildings burn down and nature takes over, we're still going to dance. We're still going to love. We're still going to have humanity, minus materialistic things and minus all these other things. So it's an important tool for communication, and especially when you're stuck in your apartment, it's important to find beauty and in something, in anything. And I think dance, ballet can present a fantasy. Dance as not ballet, but ballet and dance as a vocabulary can definitely reflect or help you reflect upon the current times and the narratives that no one speaks about, or that you don't speak about. So yeah, I think as an artist, I say responsibility, but it doesn't feel like a responsibility. But it is a responsibility for me to help communicate the why to art existing.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you finally make it back on stage, and there will be, back in your soloist role, there will be many a young black man, young black dancer, young male dancer, young dancer, looking at you on stage with the American Ballet Theatre. And you mentioned before, when you were growing up, you didn't see that representation. And of course, Misty, global name, quite rightly, global brand. Mm-hmm. As a role model, and you talked about responsibility before, but as a role model, what sort of advice would you give to other aspiring dancers who perhaps don't see enough representation, who would love to follow in your footsteps and hear this story and think, as you did looking to Carlos, thinking, perhaps one day I'd love to do that?
Yeah. This time is so beautiful because it's I think the awareness in everyone has grown so much. So people, at least people of color, are learning to love themselves, love their hair, love their bodies more. And so something that I would say and then elaborate on, that I say to myself and I would say to my younger self, is keep exercising your excellence. To keep exercising your excellence, because phrasing it that way makes you realize that you are excellent and you have that within you to exercise, but to exercise means to train, to make sure that this tool that you have, whatever you have inside of you, needs shaping and molding, and that you have the power to make that happen for yourself, with the help of hopefully an image of someone in a place that you want to be.
That's absolutely wonderful. And I know so many people will be inspired by you and by what you're doing, not just within the company, but the Creative Genius Project as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me from New York. For listeners, don't forget to go and donate to the Creative Genesis Fund. Search on GoFundMe, Creative Genesis, and follow Gabe on Instagram at Gabe Stone Shayer. Thank you so much, Gabe.
Thank you for having me.
Don't forget to subscribe. We've got some incredible interviews coming up with principal ballerinas and renowned choreographers. We love dance and ballet, and we hope you'll love us. Join us on Facebook and Twitter.